to reiterate, I appreciate everybody being out here. It's great to see a full room of people who care about their community. And it's really that simple, and that's what it's all about. In addition to working at Colby, I'm the chair of the Maine Arts Commission, and as part of our work, we talk about community all the time. It's the most important thing that link us together and that will keep us strong going forward. So turnouts like this really reaffirm the importance of getting to know our neighbors and getting to understand who we are as people and where we live, and that's what we're talking about today. John, thanks for being willing to share your story. A lot of people here know something about you, but a lot of folks probably don't, and I'm familiar with you just from a lot of your work over the years, but it's the first time I met you. If you, I'm going to start with just some real basic bio, and we can go as deep as we need to, but for those who are not familiar with your family, who was John J. Morse? John G. Morse, and where do you fit into that lineage?
Well, he's getting started in the wrong spot, so I'll have to take him back to where we came from, how we got here. We may get done by time.
First question.
My ancestors came across, not on the Mayflower, but very close to the Mayflower. In 1635, they landed in Newbury, not Newburyport, in Newbury, Massachusetts. And if you love to go around and explore, on the South Green in Newbury, there are big granite slabs with brass plaques on them, and they list all of the people who landed there in 1635. Half of Bath is on that list. And I have, in my study of history, I've learned that people nowadays, if somebody wants to move to Pittsfield or they're going to go live in Rumford or something, they just go and do it. Back in those days, you had to take the family or a town, or take a village to edit all of the kids going to school and everything like that. You had to have school teachers, blacksmiths, and farmers, lumbermen, leather people, teachers, ministers, all of those people you had to have in a village if you were going to move. So I think a lot of those people that were down there eventually got to Bath. All right, so that's 11, I'm the 11th generation from Anthony and his brother who landed down in Newbury. And they were shoemakers. None of this lumberman stuff, they were shoemakers. So there was a couple of generations, 3 or 4 generations, and then they started to come to Phippsburg. Daniel, there were 3 Daniels, and I can't keep them sorted out, but anyways, one of them started out down on Morse's Mountain. I wonder where the name came from. So, if you have you ever walked in over Morse's Mountain to the beach? And if you went over the mountain, you got down the other side, and there was a house and a barn. And across the street from the house and the barn, there's a gap in the woods so you can see out across the marsh to the water. Well, if you walk over there looking for the water, you'll fall into, what did I say his name was?
Daniel.
Daniel's cellar hole is there. So that's 7 generations. That's 7 generations back. It goes Daniel, Jonathan. Jonathan lived down to Ashdale. If you see all of the rock rubble between the intersection of Tabasco Road and the road to Small Point, that was a mill. And Jonathan had this mill, which was, they call it Sawmill Corner. Whether or not it was a sawmill or a grist mill or whatever, I don't know. Jonathan had a son named Richard. Richard got tired, at the age of 18, Richard got tired of working for Dad, and he decided that he would come up to Winnegans. And he came up to Winnegans near where the existing mill is today, and Colonel Lithgow, from over on Fiddler's Reach had built the first tide mill there in 17, this may be revisionist history, in 1794. And Richard got up there in 1802 and leased the mill from him. This was the first tide mill in Phippsburg, was that 1784. So Richard started out from there, and I don't know, but I think he had a partner, but I don't know. And then Richard had the first John G., which was my great-grandfather, and then my grandfather came along, and he was John, and then my father came along. He was actually John the Third, but they called him John Morse Jr. And then I came along, and I'm the fourth. The sawmill is no longer running. I am the culprit that cracked the line that started in 1802 and stopped running it in, I don't know, 1806 or something like that. But that's where we started out.
Why did you stop running it, and when?
Well, it was about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. I got tired of running it. My sister, she had daughters.
Yep.
And I had 2 sons, and I had 2 sons that were geeks. One of them went to Colby, and one of them went to Amherst. One of them he got his master's degree in computer science, and the other one's an industrial engineer for IDEX. They don't want to get their hands dirty. So, that's why.
Interesting. So the lumber business is a complex business, and there's a lot of technology in it these days. They could fit right in by reinventing a modern day tide mill.
Yeah, but they'd have to have a little ka-ching to go with it to buy some cable and stuff.
So I don't want to get into a long history of the tide mill, but it's an interesting history. It's not necessarily unique to Phippsburg, but it's something that's notable about Phippsburg. Can you explain why our geography and landscape is so conducive to effective tide mills?
Well, you had a place to dam off. Where the original tide mill was, they built a rock dam, and I think that if you get over on the Spear property, you'll see that there was a place that they dug out and brought over the stuff to build a dam with. There was a second mill there that belonged to Fred Parks, so there were 2 mills on that dam. If you go over to the mill between Phippsburg and Bath, there were 8 more mills there. Those started in 1835. They got permission to dam off from the legislature. You need to have a place to dam the water so that you can hold it back, and then when you get what they call a head of water, which is probably 2 or 3 feet, then you can open the sluice gates and let it run, and it will cause the turbines to move, and you have power. So,
when did you move away from to different technologies?
my family stopped running the original tide mill in 1933 and changed over to electric. We probably shouldn't have done that because we had 2 fires. Then we built a concrete one, and that lasted a little better than whatever it was. So,
When your family was in the lumber business, did you specialize in any particular kind of producing lumber for any particular kind of industry? Obviously, we have a lot of boats around here.
we had a long-term contract with BIW. We used to provide all of the timber and stuff that was the launching gear that they blocked it up with and launched it on. As far as I know, we were the only people that cut the launching wedges that they drove under the boat to get it up off of the weight onto the slides and off of the keel blocks.
How long, you must have worked with BIW for generations.
I I don't know, probably it started around First World War or so, I don't.
So you mentioned your kids didn't want to stay in the business and whatnot. For you, when did the business really start changing to the point where you realized it was maybe time to get out? Was it a slow, I mean, there's a long history of mills in Maine that have, some adapted to technology and some not.
Well, there was a lot of competition. You know, a lumber yard, a sawmill or whatever is just like a grocery store or a hardware store or something like that. There's always competition. And there were 8 mills that were on the dam down there. And starting from the Bath side, some of them started to throw in the towel. There were a couple of fires down there that they lost some mills, but they threw in the towel because just like all kinds of businesses, there are seasons when it works, and there are years when business is lousy. And if you can't make money, you can't pay employees to run the mill. So it's a simple economic.
Yeah. Did you consider scaling up and trying to compete with the bigger?
No.
Okay, so your family has a lot of history in Phippsburg as well as in Bath, and for many years your family was involved with real estate in downtown Bath. Can you talk a little bit about the Saginaw Real Estate Association, I believe was the name, and your history with that? And go from there.
Well, probably if I tell the family secrets, why, it'll give you an idea why I wanted to give up the sawmill. So, I think that Dad got tired of getting his hands dirty, and he was interested in finding some other way to make a little bit of money. So he was interested in real estate. And there was a while when I think we owned probably 6 or 8 telephone garages that were where New England Telephone kept their trucks and stuff like that. We had one in Bath, Brunswick, Rockland. I don't know, I can't remember what. I think there was one in Portland.
Had one in
Anyways,
Presque Isle for a while.
yeah, there was one in Caribou Inn, one in Presque Isle, Dover Foxcroft too. But anyway, so he sort of liked that, but when it came to the maintenance, he wasn't interested in that. We had leases, and the leases ran out or something, so he decided in the 50s that he would. The Saginaw Real Estate Association was a shareholder business. It started out with the Moses owned that and whatever. And a lot of the tenants in the business buildings uptown, they were stockholders in the building, just sort of protect themselves a little bit, or so that they would have a little say. And if you raised the rent too high, I didn't like it, and I was gonna make a noise. So anyways, Dad started to accumulate shares of Saginaw, and then later into the 60s, towards the end of the 60s, he finally got a majority share. And then he could do whatever he wanted. And he actually bought a couple of buildings. He bought the Grant building. He bought the building where Brackett's is. But otherwise, he held on to the buildings that were already held by Saginaw Real Estate Association. Saginaw Real Estate Association, I think, revisionist history again, started sometime in the 1880s, somewheres in there. The big event was in 1894, the Saginaw block, which is at front and center there. There was a big fire, and that burned, and several of the buildings that were around that burned off. And then they rebuilt it. But this was before we had anything to do with it. When we had it, why Dad worked at trying to keep keep the storefronts filled and be able to let the store owners have a rent where they could make business and he could make his mortgage payments. And then when he died, why, my sister came back to town and she helped to run the business, and I put in my 10 cents whether it was accepted or not. I guess I'm not telling, I didn't tell the rest of the story of the family. I have a twin sister, Frances, and then I have a little sister, Jane, who has passed away. And they were the shining stars of the family. Frances was a doctor. She was an internist down in Chelmsford. And Jane was a lawyer in Boston, and I was the black sheep of the family in Winningham. So, but anyway,
Worked out all right.
it worked out all right, yeah.
So in the last decade or so, the Real Estate Association has started to divest properties in Bath. And why did you start doing that, and what is your hope for the future?
Because I'm 80 years old. And I guess it would be 8 years ago that I started to do that. One of the owners, or in fact it was Brackett's, asked if they could purchase their building. And I saw that, hey, I don't have to go out and pound the sidewalk to get somebody else to buy it. They're gonna buy it. So it's okay. And it took me a while. We had 19 buildings altogether, and it took me a while, but we finally passed them all along. A lot of the buildings, I was very particular in who was going to buy the buildings. I wanted somebody in there that was gonna make it work. I sold Rennie's to them. They were complaining, well, we've got an opportunity to go out to CVS because the parking is nicer out there and whatever. And we had a little bit of negotiation. And John's first job when he was growing up was being manager of the Bath Rennie's. So he had a little sentimental value there, and I worked that out a little bit. But we worked out a price, and I sold him the building. And I wanted Bath to have this go-to place in Bath, and Rennie's is a go-to place in Bath. And so I accomplished something because I kept him there. Also, he put $1 million into that building, renovating it too. So that didn't hurt the tax values of Bath either.
Well, thank you for doing that. It's important to keep those community traditions alive.
You're not a Rennie's customer, you're up in Waterville.
No, we have a new Rennie's in Waterville, but it did move out to the They could have gone downtown Waterville, but chose to go into one of the strip malls. But they just opened last year.
Well, some of the other stores, Lisa Marie bought her building. I convinced Betsy and Mike Fear to buy the building where our office was, and their store is now You're Cooking there. And I'm very pleased that these people stayed. And one of the nice things about Bath is, in most cases, the owner is in the store. And those are the kind of stores that you want to shop in.
Well, you might have just answered this question, but what are you most proud of in terms of what Bath has become?
I'm proud that it stayed the same. I mean, we didn't tear down any brick buildings and put up other stuff and whatever like that. It stayed just the way it is, and it's a downtown. It's a real downtown.
And a destination.
Yeah, and people from away, they don't know what they're looking for, but when they get there, they know that they're happy with the result.
So if I were writing a story about our event, that would be my lead, right? That describes it exactly right. It's about community, and it's about that local So your family has this reputation for being philanthropic and community oriented, and certainly what you've just described affirms all of that. And this might be an odd question, but what does it mean to you to be known as a pillar of the community? No, you could be the mayor, you could be on the council or the select board as you were in Phippsburg, but it's different to be a pillar of the community.
I am not a pillar of
Collectively, your family. They named a high school.
No, that was another branch of the family, and if you haven't already found out, he was a crook.
Well, families are common. But, no, seriously, you did what you did in Bath because you care. It's deeper than just doing business. Was that right?
Yeah, well, I should bring my wife in on this one here. The Y wanted to build a new Y, the old Y, which was next, half of that building we bought after they left. But the old Y was there and it needed to be reformed. And when they put the new pool in, Dad was really interested in the new pool, so he helped to put that in, and that was in memory of my grandfather. Some of the money, he didn't pay for all of it. Certain people twisted his arm, and so we did that. But as far as being philanthropic, my wife was the chairman of the board at the Y when they voted to build the new Y. So she's quite proud of that, by the way.
Well, that's how things get done, right?
Right. Yeah. But it cost us some. It cost us some to get it done.
Well, good investment in the community. So what has kept you here all these years? You could go anywhere, you could live a lot of places. What do you love about living in Phippsburg and being involved?
Everybody likes me.
Have you thought about moving other places?
Why would I move someplace else? I mean, look at how many years my family's been here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go someplace else and I'll have to find new roots to put down. And the trouble, when you move someplace else, and maybe people have experienced this when you move to Phippsburg, you don't know who your neighbor's gonna be. I know who my neighbor is. But there's some that I don't know too, because things are changing in Phippsburg. But who wants to move out of Phippsburg? Right. Take a poll, see who wants to move out. So why ask me that question?
Just prefer new opportunities, you just never know. But no, I'm not, I think it's great.
I'm 80, I don't need me new one.
So let's talk, okay, you're 80, you've met a lot of people. Who are some of your heroes or role models or, you got a list?
I have a list. Now this is, I don't know. This is not a role model list. This is a list of people that I admire or admired. 12 of them are dead now, so it doesn't work so well. But these are people, they aren't my heroes, they aren't my mentors. They're just people that I admire for the things that they've done. And first of all, I got to start off with my father and my mother. My mother graduated from Andover Newton Theological School, and she used it a little bit before she came to Phippsburg and was fighting crime and whatever in Phippsburg when she met my father. He hauled her out of the ditch when she got stuck one time. Or was it a flat tire? I don't know. You make up the story, be what it is. And then I admire my twin sister. I mean, she's a medical doctor, stuff like that. She went to Colby too. You can take credit for that. And but she became a doctor when they didn't want female doctors. I mean, I went to University of Vermont. She went up to University of Vermont to see if she could get into the medical school. And the guy there told her, no, we don't want women, because women are going to go out, they're gonna get married, they're gonna have kids, and they're gonna quit 2 years after they start their practice. And we do not want to do that. But anyways, she got somebody at Tufts to take her. And she's done a really good job, had a really good profession. And then there's my little sister Jane, and because she was a lawyer, so I had to believe what she was telling me, because aren't lawyers always right? And then these are some other people that I have that were friends of my father, or I've been associated with on boards and whatever. Dick Morrill in Brunswick was chairman of the hospital board for 25 years, and then when they told him he needed to get done, why, he said, well, John would make a good replacement. So, thanks to him. And Betty Noyes, if everybody knows who Betty Noyes is, I admire her because she is one of these people that got a pile of money, and she did the right thing with it. She didn't take it and buy up all of these companies and run this business and run that business, stuff like that. She used the money that she had and she spent it in the right place. So I admire her for that. Bill Haggett, who was president of BIW, he raised the majority of the money to pay for the new Y, and he was raising money to pay for the addition on the Y that they're working on now. He was on the Marine Museum board, went to church with us. He's a nice guy all around. There's a guy by the name of Commander Peterson. None of you know him. I don't even know if he's alive, but he was my first commanding officer when I was in the Navy. And he treated me right, and I learned a lot of stuff from him. So I've always admired him. I had other people that I worked under in the Navy that, well, one of them came from Georgia, went to Georgia Tech, so he didn't get any stars.
He didn't make the list.
Well, I will explain to you why he didn't make the list. My ship was stationed in Newport, Rhode Island, and I came home there was a long weekend in February, and I came home for the long weekend that I had off, and then usually I would start around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd drive back to Newport, Rhode Island, and I'd be there on time, check in, whatever. Well, we had a blizzard. And I said I'm going to start early, so I started at noontime. I went down I-95, I got to Middleton, Massachusetts, and I spent the night in the passing lane of I-95. And when I was late getting to Newport the next morning, this guy from Georgia, he didn't know what snow was. He didn't have any idea. So he docked me for being late. There was another guy, came from Albany, New York, and he had the same problem. You know, they docked him for being late. I didn't think he was very understanding. Maybe it was a biased opinion. Anyway, more Navy people. There was a guy named Chuck Richelieu who lived down in West Bath, and Chuck worked for us in Saginaw as a manager up there for a while, and then lo and behold, here he is over at the hospital, on the board over at the hospital. So my father died, and guess who got elected to take his place? Chuck made sure that I was on there. Chuck was the clerk of the works, so to speak, when we built the new hospital in 2001. Great guy. he was a captain and he was a submariner too, so.
Took care of all the details.
Oh, yeah, there weren't any details that were left out. And then, there's another guy more recently, Admiral Dugan Shipway, he was the president of BIW and he worked up here in Bath. He was also on the board at the hospital. The staff members cringed when we were gonna have a board meeting because they didn't know what he was gonna ask for a question. He was very detailed too. But he was a really nice guy. I helped him raise money with him for the Senior Health Center. And then another person is Ada Haggett. I don't know, Ada was, she was the person that made the Historical Society go over here. She lived over here in the 1774 house. And I admired her for all of her historical stuff that she did and how diligent she was about getting stuff done. And so I always admired that. And then these people have all been deceased. My last one is Jane Stevens that moved down to Popham, and she had the idea of building Maine's first ship. And somehow my wife and Betsy knew her too well. And she and I had our arm twisted and it got in on that program because of Jane Stevens, and I always admired her. I mean, Jane would never tell you that you can't do something. She always knew that you could do something. And then a couple of other people. These people are alive. Glenn Hutchinson is the president of Bath Savings Institution. I've been on the corporators up there for many years. In fact, I've got thrown out because I'm too old. But Glenn is such a nice guy. I mean, he has all of his staff up there all admire him and they get along. Everybody is happy. Bath Savings is one of the best philanthropic banks around here. He always is looking after stuff that is local. The hospital, the library, the YMCA, he's made sure that they have given money. Peter White, the president of my high school class, he grew up in West Bath, and Evelyn Desmond was his aunt, and he went in the Navy. He went to Annapolis and was successful in the Navy. Nicest guy you want to know, and I've always admired him for his activity. I believe that he and I are the only two officers in the Navy that came out of our class. And then we got one more person that is Doug Lee, who grew up in West Bath, and he was a naval architect by trade. He and his wife designed a windjammer named Heritage, which is over 100 feet long. And not only did they design it, but they built it from scratch over to Rockland. And Betsy and I have been with them over 10 trips. And I just love being out there, and if I behave myself, sometimes he lets me take the helm, but not a lot. So I admire him, and he's finally decided that he needs to retire too, and he stepped back and he found somebody. Well, he actually had a couple of people that worked for him. He got them all trained, and they bought the boat from him. So I admire him. He did that. He made the boat go. He kept the boat, and it's good.
Yeah. So some of the themes that emerge from your list is community first, very people oriented, which seems to be ways you've lived your life as well. Just an observation.
I don't know. Yes, I will, yeah, I do, I could be accused of talking too long to people, but like that, but
You mentioned you went to the University of Vermont. What did you study?
business administration.
And then came back and ran the business.
No, I got in the Navy by the skin of my teeth, so I avoided the draft.
What are your passions? What do you do when you're not thinking about work or family or whatnot?
Being on the water. We had a boat, we gave that away last year. So we're getting too old to, when you try to get out of the dinghy onto the swim platform in the back of the boat, and the dinghy fills halfway full before you get onto the swim platform, it's time to retire.
There are a lot of folks here, and I'm sure there are many questions. So before I could keep talking, but I want to open it up and see what folks. Yes, I'll try to pick out. Go ahead. Jim.
Couple quick ones.
Yeah.
Your first ancestor, Daniel Morse, was he in the Revolutionary War and is buried on the mountain in the family cemetery?
Up to the north of the houses in the barn, yes.
Okay.
Somebody over to Brightwater thought they were related to him, and that's why it's an old cemetery, but it's a 1935-ish stone.
And then,
Jonathan was also a Revolutionary War soldier. I think, maybe I'm being detrimental to his reputation, but I think that being a Revolutionary War soldier amounted to him going down on Bald Head with his shotgun and waiting for some outlaws to come in.
and then the sawmills. I was recently trying to find a little information on what stood where the North Creek farmhouse now is, the current one, and read that a Morse had a sawmill at Ashdale Corner, 1795, and provided the lumber for a house next door, which was called the Square House, and it's gone. I don't, unless I was.
The Square House is down to, near the Aliquippa, down to Small Point.
Oh, but your family had a
Yes.
sawmill at Ashdale right there
Yes.
and provided the lumber.
I don't know, I don't think they lived in the house that is there, because the house that's there is too new. And, what's the guy, Gardner? John Gardner, who lives there, he says that if you go from the house towards the creek, that there's a bunch of brick. And he thinks that might have been Jonathan's house and the brick house there. The Morses had some connections with the Lees, who were out on the end of Fiddler's Reach, which used to be the Fisk property, I called it. But the Lees were there, and they made pottery and stuff, and they made bricks. So there were some brick houses in town. I think the one that may have been the Morses met its demise. But you got where Ray Campbell had his house, there's the house at the corner of the Stony Brook Road.
Mm-hmm.
If you look back in the history of those people that were there, they are connected to the Lees that were over on Fiddler's Reach. And the house over there on Fiddler's Reach was a brick house too.
Thank you.
Right. Yes, right.
Hey, John, I was wondering if you could just talk a little about kind of the ecosystem of the mill when you were running it, of where were the trees coming from, what was the main species you were milling, were they all coming from Phippsburg or elsewhere, and then
Oh, this is a long
How
story.
are
This
they-
is a long story.
how are they getting there?
If we go back to the tide mills, why Grampy or whatever, I don't know whether he had a Model A or how he got up, but he went up country, he bought trees up country, and they somehow marked them with an iron brand or something like that. They went in the water, they came down the river. A lot of mills had logs that came down the river. There was a place in Richmond, Brown's Boom up there, where they sorted some of them and they put them in what you would call a boom, which was a bunch of logs holding all of these logs together so that they could come down the river. So we would get some that came down. Somehow somebody out there in a rowboat was steering it somehow, and you used the tide. If the tide was going down, why, great, it was taking you to Winnegans. But you had to stop when the tide changed, go ashore, find one of these pins with the round pin with the ring on it, which if you walk around the shore, you can find that, and you tied it off. And waited for the tide to change, and then it came down. You got it down to the outside of the dams, and whose ever boom of logs it was, they opened the door. You're gonna open the door anyway to let the water in, to build up a head of water to run the mill. You opened the door and the boom of logs went inside of the boom, and then you had them captured. They were mostly spruce and pine. Oak does not float. Don't let anybody tell you that does not float. And I have figured out that the only way that they ever got oak trees, you had to have oak to build ships with. So you had to run it through the sawmill. So how did you get it there? I think that people tied oak logs to a big pine log. They were tied together. The pine log would float the oak, and they came down as a pair or triplets or whatever. There were local ways of getting logs. I mean, the logs didn't have to come from all the way up country. They could be local. People could put them in, but they put them in a boom, then they floated them. There may be that there were some logs that were brought in the winter, and they used to have what you call a scoot. Anybody know what a scoot is? It's a big wooden heavy sled, and they put that on there. You had either had your oxen or your horses would bring the sled to the pond, and they'd put them out on the ice in the pond in the wintertime. So.
Yes.
While you're still on the thought of getting logs for the mills, and thinking of so many tide mills in Phippsburg ultimately, there must have been a serious problem with capital, because you had to pay for those logs, and you had to pay for them immediately. I think they wouldn't let you loose taking the logs without putting something up front.
Well, it probably depend on whether you knew the guy that you were buying the logs from. If he was your buddy and you happened to take a box that had some bottles in it on the way up there, it might have helped negotiations a little bit.
All right.
That's revisionist history too.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with John. Yeah, go first.
The tidal mills that were at Winnegans, were they all lumber mills, or did they
Yes.
grind grain, or did all?
I don't
lumber?
think there were any grain at Winnegans.
No.
Karen?
And, well, just, so you said earlier there was a stone dam, was it like stone and timber and stuff? Cause I think you can still see remnants.
Well, the dam that was down where the present mill is, that went across there, it was small rocks. Put them in a barge, bring them over, dump them off.
Uh-huh.
You had a board dam
Uh-huh.
standing up, and the rocks on either side of it held it in place. But the board dam sort of kept the water from escaping.
Right.
Makes sense. Karen?
So I want people to hear as much as they want to hear about the dams and the tide mills, those are fascinating. But John, you have a deep association, speaking of your local roots, with some buildings here in Phippsburg Center, one that's up the road here, having to do with your education. Could you spend a minute talking about your primary school education in Phippsburg?
Phippsburg had one-room schools until 59 was when the, 58 was when the consolidated school was built. So I went to one-room schools until the 8th grade, and I was graduated in the first class from the new school, which was in 58. The teachers were the same from the one-room schools. They didn't hire all new ones for the new school. They used the old teachers. So that was nothing wrong with that. I started out at Winnegans. There was when I was there were 3 grades, 1 through 3. My father says that when he went there, Ruth Trueworthy was the teacher there. And I've seen recently a picture of a couple of classes sitting on the front steps with Ruth standing there beside him. And some of them are labeled and some of them aren't. Then, 4th, 5th, and half of the 6th grade, I went down to Small Point, to the one-room schoolhouse down there. And we rode on the bus back and forth to go down there. We had an assortment of teachers down there because the teachers had a little trouble with the students in those particular classes. And in the middle of the 6th grade, we got transferred to the center. And this was because some young individual had been up in the attic over the ceiling in the school and fell through. So the number of pupils was minimalized so that the teacher could have better disciplinary control.
Speaking of discipline, any stories about horse chestnuts in the school here? You told it in public at Cookie's funeral, so.
Of course, center school was really close to the center store. So either at recess or at noontime, we were prone to going up to the center store. If you look carefully, when you come back from the center store on the corner, the first house on the left, which was known as the parsonage, had a big horse chestnut tree out front. And certain times a year, they got deposited on the road and whatever. But the tree is not, there's a little one, but I don't think there's a big one there. So when we were, certain people, when we were coming back from the center store, might happen to bend over and pick up a couple of horse chestnuts and put them in their pockets and bring them back for just entertainment to the school. And when back in the one-room schools, when noontime was over or recess was over, the teacher had to go out front, out the front door, ring the bell so that the people would come in. So while she was doing this, there used to be a couple of people that might happen to go in early. They were tired and wanted to go in early, and on the way to their seat, they might pass the coal stove. And if a door happened to open and nobody was looking, you took the horse chestnuts out of your pocket, tossed them in to help the fire go. Well, the horse chestnuts were they were good. It took a while for them to catch on. But about 5 minutes from the time that the teacher closed the front door and started the class, there seemed to be some boom. And there was always somebody was supposed to be stand up and admit that they happened to do that. Not many people admitted that they did that.
Were you among them?
I'll never tell.
Any questions back here? Other questions? Yes, right here, sir.
I'd love to hear a little more about how the ice harvesting and the damming worked for those handful of ponds. Because you mentioned that in order to make the dam waterproof, they had a wooden slab.
There was no ice harvesting down around the mills.
How about down towards Parker Head and Center Pond right here?
There, down at Parker Head, there were two tide mills at Parker Head, and they burned, which was a crisis for the people in Parker Head, because that was their employment.
Yeah.
And the selectmen, after a couple of years, they were hurting for tax money too. So they came, and one of my relatives, and I don't know which one it was, I did once, but I can't remember now, and somebody else were asked to rebuild the dam and rebuild the sawmills. Well, they probably had some financial experience with sawmills, so they decided that they weren't going to rebuild the sawmills, but they were gonna rebuild the dam and be able to cut ice inside the dam and ship it. And you go down there now and you can see the pilings out there where the wharf was, where they bring the ship in to load the ice onto the ship.
Do I understand correctly that the original road from Popham up to Bath actually crossed that dam and went up Parker Neck?
I don't think so.
No.
Revisionist history, but I don't think so.
Yes.
Was it a general practice to store lumber underwater at times? You stored pine logs and to a certain extent spruce logs, but you stored pine logs in the water so that the worms would not get in them, prevent the worms from being in them. And
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if it was a Morse mill or not, but do you know anything about what the mill on dam on Spirit Pond was, why it was built?
No, I guess I'm ignorant on that one.
There's not much about it, so I thought maybe in your travels of that you would think.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could describe what it was like to work in one of those tide mills? How long was an average shift? And then it must have followed the tide, so these folks were showing up at all times of...
If you worked in the tide mill, you learned. When the tide changed and was running in, it ran in until it was high tide. When it was high tide, it started to run out. You had two big doors that were open to let the water in. When the tide changed to run it out, the two doors slammed shut by not gravity, but whatever, force of the water starting to run in the other direction. When that happened, the people that lived near the tide mills knew that within about 2 hours, they had to be at work. Because you had to have about 2 to 3 feet of head of water above the outside, so the outside water ran out, and you had it dammed to keep the stuff inside. And then, when you got ready to work, you opened out the little small door, the sluice door, allowed the water to go in, it came down, and there was a turbine in the bottom. It turned the turbine, which came up with a shaft with a big gear on it, and all of these shafts and pulleys ran the machinery.